presently, I'm interviewing my paternal grandmother, Neva Robinson. She's visiting my house today, and I'm happy to say that after only a brief 3-month stay with me and my family, that she's back living at her own house in North Toledo. Okay. Grammy, could you start by telling us what year you were born and how old that makes you?
I was born February 21st, 1905, which makes me 86 years and 1 month old.
Okay. You grew up near Traverse City, Michigan.
No, I grew up in a little town in in Lower Michigan by the name of Alberta, Elberta.
Okay. But that's near the Traverse City area,
Well,
right?
it's about 30 miles from Traverse.
Okay.
The town consisted of about 700 people. My dad was a small town barber. My mother was a music teacher. She taught violin and piano and organ. She had gone to school in Big Rapids, Michigan, and took up music before she was married. So every child prisoner in this small town came to her for music lessons. And I grew up listening to the choir from church practicing every Wednesday night.
In your house?
Right in my own home. For a long time we only had a pump organ. And then my brother went to work and bought my mother a piano.
That was
So
nice.
we had a piano.
Now, did you live on a farm?
No, we lived in this small town,
Okay.
but they still allowed you to have animals. So we had 3 cows. We had all kinds of milk, cheese, buttermilk, whatever.
Did you have any yogurt?
Any yogurt? No. They didn't think of it in that time.
Oh, okay.
But we had lots of smell from the cows.
I bet.
And not only that, we had an outside toilet.
Oh. Wasn't that a little bit cold?
It was cold in the winter, so my mother had a jug in the back woodshed.
Oh.
So we didn't have to go out at night.
Well, that was
Other
nice.
than that, we had to go out with a little broom and brush off the seats from the smell.
What did you use for toilet paper?
Old catalogs.
Okay.
Sears Roebuck, Montgomery Ward. Oh my goodness. All those old catalogs.
Okay.
I can still, and we used to crumple them all up to make them soft.
So that's it was a little bit different growing up in rural Michigan than say your children growing up, or my dad at least growing up in
Oh my,
Toledo.
yes, I guess so. In fact, we had an outside toilet until my second son was born,
And your second son being
Bill.
okay. How old were you when you met and married Grandpa?
I met Grandpa when I was 15. I was in high school. And we didn't see a lot of one another because he was a little older, so he could substitute for some of the men in the Coast Guard station. He was 16, and he could be a lookout or whatever when they would go on vacation. So I didn't see an awful lot of him, but we gradually got so we loved one another eventually. And the summer I was 17, my mother became real ill. And my brother and my dad told me if I would stay home and take care of my mother and, keep the house going, they would see that I had some new clothes for school in the fall, because I would have been in the 11th grade. Well, came fall and nobody came through with any clothes. So I started arguing with my dad and my brother. And my dad got real hostile. He was inclined that way. And he took me and set me out on the porch. And I told him I would not come back in the house. So I went down to my cousin's. They had a restaurant down on the main street. And my sister threw some of my clothes out the window. I picked them up, and my friend we were going to go to a little town, Manistee, to a show with another couple. But when I saw him, I said, I'm not going. And of course he had already gave me a ring. And I said, I'm just not going anywhere today. And he said, let's get married.
So you got married, huh?
And I said, well, I can't get married because my mother would have to sign my papers for me, or my
you were
dad.
only 17?
Because I wasn't 18 yet. So we went back to my mother's house, and we took her with us. We went up to Beulah and got a license and went over to the church parsonage in Frankfort, Michigan. And my husband, or he was my friend then, Lyle, he asked his mother and his sister to go with us. And we went and got married that day.
So it was just kind of out of the blue.
That was a marriage out of a parsonage. And our first baby, that was 15th of September. And the next year, August 31st, our first baby was born.
And that baby was named?
And that baby was J.L. That's all his name. He only lived 5 days.
What did he die from?
He died from an infection from circumcision.
Wow. Well, how many children did you have after that?
4.
Did you name them in order?
And I named the next one was a little girl, Alice Jane. That was her whole name.
Well, what does everybody call her?
They called her Dana. She was born 16 months after that. And then there was Bill. Well, my husband then had joined the Coast Guard. So we lived out on at Point Betsy, they call it. There was a lighthouse and a Coast Guard station out there. So we lived out there for 2 years. And then our little son Bill was born. Then we moved back to Alberta, the little town. My husband went to work for the railroad. And he worked there for 44 years. And we lived, I think, in every town along the Ann Arbor Railroad.
Really? All up and down.
We lived in Frankfort, Alberta, Frankfort, Cadillac, Mount Pleasant, Ann Arbor, and we ended up in Toledo.
Well, after you had my Uncle Bill,
Mm-hmm.
you said you had 4 children, so you
Yeah.
must have had 2 more, and I know you did.
Yes, we did. I had another little boy. His name was Lyle Edward, after his dad.
And how many years after?
That was about 8 years or 7 years after Bill. And
What did you call him?
we called him Mickey.
How come you called him Mickey?
Well, he was born on my husband was a great baseball man.
Mhm.
And he liked this Mickey Cochran. So when the baby came, we called him Mickey.
Oh, okay. And then how? I know my dad's your baby.
Well,
So.
so then 7 or 8 years, I don't know which. Let's see, I'd have to count it out. It's either 7 or 8 years later. Another son was born. His name is James Dale,
He's my dad.
and that is your dad.
Okay, now tell us how old you were when you had my dad,
I was 38.
and how old were you when you had Uncle Jay, your first baby?
I was 18.
So
And
20 years later.
Well, I was almost 19
Okay.
because it was over. It was a year, see, later.
Okay.
After our marriage.
So, how did you feel about being a mom again so late in life?
Well, to be truthful, I was disgusted.
How
But-
come?
Well, I thought I was too old to have a baby because my daughter had been married and had a little baby, so I was a grandma.
Oh, so Dad's nephew's older than him.
My daughter's son is 7 months older than my baby.
Well, isn't that a little bit different for the time that you were living in? People didn't usually have babies that late, did they?
No, hardly ever.
No.
But I did, and it seemed that he was sent to me from God.
Well, why do you think
Because
that?
God knew that Mickey was going to die.
And how old was Mickey when he died?
He was 16. He was going to be 17 in September. He died in June. He was 16.
And how did he die?
He died from cancer of the bone.
And cancer wasn't a real big issue then, was
No, we had him to every doctor we could think of, and they didn't even have the chemotherapy treatment them days. And we done everything the doctor told us to do for him, but he had his leg amputated, his left leg, and he lived a year and a half after that.
Okay. Well, out of your 3 living children, Dana,
Mm-hmm.
Bill, and Jim,
Mm-hmm.
can you help me name the grandchildren? Okay.
Well, I'll try.
Okay. Just name Dana's children.
Alice Jane's children was Jackie Jr. and Terrence Lyle and Gregory Dale.
Okay. And are all 3 of those boys still alive?
No, Gregory died when he was 21 years old.
Okay. And could you name Uncle Bill's children for me?
He had one little girl, Linda Sue, and she lived only 12 years, and she died from nephritis.
Okay. Does he have any other kids?
He had and 4 years later, he adopted a boy, David.
Okay. And your son Jim, my dad.
My son Jim has had 3 children: Jennifer Lynn,
Is me.
Carrie Ann, and James Dale Jr.
Okay. And what are the age spans between all your grandchildren, from Jackie to Jimmy?
From Jackie to Jimmy, oh my goodness, how much would it be?
Well, how old is Jackie?
Jackie's 48,
And how old's Jimmy?
and Jimmy is 13.
And those are your first generation grandchildren.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, since Jackie's 48 and his brother Terry is
43.
43, I assume that some of your grandchildren have children. Well, I know they do.
Yes, they do.
And could you name the great-grandchildren for Jackie's?
Well, let's see. Kimberly Sue
Hmm.
and Kevin Eugene and Gary. I don't know what Gary's
Douglas. Gary Douglas.
name is. That what it is?
Mhm.
Okay. Gary and Daniel I don't know his middle
I
name
don't
either.
know his either.
And Gretchen
Gretchen Diane.
and Claudia Jane, I think.
And how about Terry's kids?
Terry has got 2 boys. Greg is, he was in the Marine Corps, but he is out in California now, and I think he's 24. And he had Scott, and Scott is still living at home. He's about 22.
Okay, and how about David, your adopted grandson?
David was married and divorced, and he has 2 little girls, Ashley and Alexis,
Okay,
and they are 4 and 2.
okay, so your great-grandchildren range from about 26 to 2.
Then I have 2 great-great-grandchildren.
And they are Kimberly's.
No, they are Kimberly's little ones, Heather and Matthew.
And they are how old?
I think Heather is 7, and Matthew must be about 4 or 5. I'm not sure.
So the generations really overlap in age.
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
they do.
Great-grandchildren older than grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren older than great-grandchildren. Let's see, altogether that would make 8 grandchildren, 6 of whom are living.
Mm-hmm. Now wait, no. See, Greg is gone.
Well,
that-
6
that's
are
a-
living.
He was a great-grandchild.
No.
No, he wasn't either. Greg was a grandchild.
Okay. So you had 8 grandchildren altogether. 6
What?
of them are living.
Yeah, 6 and, yeah. Now wait, Jackie had 6.
Those
Terry-
are great, Grandma. I'm just talking about grandchildren.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Maybe we're getting a little long into this.
Yeah, I had Jackie, Terry, and Greg, and Linda,
Davy.
and David. Who else? Should be one more.
Jennifer, Carrie, and Jimmy.
I don't know. There was. You
Grandma.
have to figure it out.
Grandma. Jennifer, Carrie, and Jimmy.
Yeah, that's right. They're my grandchildren.
Okay, so there were 8 of them. And there
Okay.
were 10 great-grandchildren
Mm-hmm.
and 2 great-great-grandchildren.
Right.
Well, it's no wonder you get confused. You have all those grandchildren and you can't remember which level they
I know
are.
each name, but I don't know just everything about them.
Okay. Well, let's see. I want to switch onto a different subject now. Being that you have so many family members and that you came from a relatively large family yourself, and so did your husband, and being that you're 86, I know that you have experienced many deaths of loved ones.
I'm afraid so, because my whole family are gone, all but me.
Okay, so you're the only child left from your
I'm
family.
the only child left from a family of 8, or my parents and then the 8 children. I'm
And
the only
your
one left.
husband and his family are all gone?
All gone.
Okay. And you've lost 2 children and 2 grandchildren.
Right.
Okay, and a daughter-in-law.
And a daughter-in-law.
And how have you learned to deal with these deaths? And,
I have leaned on the Lord Jesus.
okay. And what is your philosophy on losing these people? How do you...
I feel that the Lord wanted them and that they were destined to go before they were ever even born.
So you just handle it as they come?
So I handle each one with the Lord helping me, guiding me, teaching me, leading me.
Okay. Okay, we'll go to a happier subject now.
Okay?
Can you give all of us young people any advice about getting older?
Uh, in the first place, put God above everybody. And then your parents. Do what they ask you to do. And try to obey them as much as you possibly can. And love them because they love you.
Okay. Okay, now, this is something that I've studied in some of my classes, and I know it has personally affected you. Sometimes when people get older, they lose some of their facilities.
Mhm.
Not necessarily mental facilities, but...
Let me go to the bathroom first.
Okay. We'll stop in a
Oh.
second.
I have to forget where we were.
Okay, well that's all right. I was just going to ask you how, I know that you've lost most of your sight
Right.
due to 3 conditions, correct?
I what?
You've lost them due to 3 different conditions in your eye.
Yes.
Okay, and do you know what those are?
Glaucoma, dead nerves behind the pupil,
Macular degeneration.
and macular degeneration, and the doctor says I have a cataract.
Okay. So, how do you feel? Can you describe the different feelings you have about losing your eyesight?
I get real frustrated at times because I've been too independent. And when I have to depend on somebody else, I get frustrated.
You get nervous?
Mm-hmm. And it counts for my high blood pressure,
Which
so
is
to speak.
So, you think that how long have you had high blood pressure?
Well, I've had high blood pressure for many years.
You've been on medicine for it?
And I've been on medicine for it for, oh, I have to stop and think. Ever since the day that President Kennedy died.
So November
That's-
22nd, 1963.
That's when I first became aware of the high blood pressure.
Okay.
And I had to go to the doctor. And that's when that became apparent, and I've doctored for it ever since.
Okay, and you feel that your eye loss, taking away your independence, makes you really nervous, and that
Yes.
makes your hypertension...
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think that's got a lot to do with it.
And that's part of the reason why you had to move in with us for a short time,
I moved
right?
in with your father and mother on September 29th, 1990. And I lived here until February, let's see, about the 14th or 15th of February.
So you were here about 4.5 months?
Yes, I was.
5 months, maybe.
But I began to get that independent feeling, and I needed to go home.
And you think being here when you needed to go home made your blood pressure worse?
No, it helped. Whatever happened here in those 4 months and a half helped me to overcome the problem that I was having.
Well, that's good. So you'd say that that was a benefit from...
A benefit, a real benefit.
Are there any other benefits that you've gained from your loss of eyesight?
Well, I've learned touch. I am more conscious of touching things and knowing what they are.
Okay. And do you hear things better? Or do you...
My hearing is fair. It's not entirely way up to par, but it's enough so I can understand if somebody's going to give me heck.
Okay. Let's see. What's one good thing that you've gained from getting older?
Learn to be content with what I have.
Okay. So you've just learned to accept things as they come and...
And take each day on let it be sufficient unto itself.
So you you don't let your handicaps bring you too down.
Well, sometimes it gets me down, yes, that's why I'm here today.
But you keep going.
But I keep going, and I had to call for help last night because I began getting a little bit frustrated again.
Yeah.
So I'm here today, but today I'm better.
Well, that's good. Now you know you can
Now
control
I'm
it to a
thinking
point.
in terms of going back home.
Well, that's good, Grandma.
It'll probably be tomorrow or the next day. I don't know for sure which.
Okay. Besides the loss of your sight, what's something else that you could do without from getting older?
What I could do without,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Oh, I don't know just how to answer that. What could I do without?
Just from getting older,
Um,
part of aging.
living alone, I guess. I eventually maybe I'll have to come to it, but right now I don't want to.
Well, you live alone. You live on your own.
I live on my own. I can take care of my own bills and things, except somebody else has to write my checks.
But you're afraid that maybe someday you won't be able to do all
But
that.
someday I may not be able to.
So that fear is something
There's
you could do
always
without.
that fear is what brings on these anxiety spells.
Okay. But mentally, I know that you're functioning way up to par.
Well, I'm trying to. Now I can remember numbers very, very good. Names sometimes get away from me. But numbers, if somebody tells me a number, I remember it. I don't know how come, but I do.
A phone number or something, or an address?
Mhm. An address. Now, my son Bill called me on the next day after Easter, and I asked him for his son's address. I knew part of it, but I didn't know the zip code. But once he told me, I haven't forgotten it.
Well, that's great. Now, your sister, your younger sister,
Mhm.
Aunt Myrna,
Mhm.
she lost some of her mental facilities as
She
aged.
became what they called it dementia, or something similar to that,
Yeah, that's right.
because she did not know where she was most of the time, and she couldn't remember anything. And one side, I hate to say this, but when she would put on her makeup, she would only put it on one side of her face.
She never did the whole.
And she didn't seem to know that she needed the other side too. So she became an invalid and had to go into a nursing home.
And how old was she at that time?
She was 70, well, she died when she was 74. And she was ill, I would say she was coming into this for about 6, 7 years.
So this happened to her relatively young.
Yes, I would say so.
Do you know what kind of dementia she had? Did she have Alzheimer's or any other?
They didn't have Alzheimer's on her death certificate. It just, I really don't even remember what they did put on, for sure. Seems like she had a heart attack or something.
Okay. But you don't know what caused her
I'm
being
not sure.
demented?
No. I had been with her at that particular time for a whole month. I had been up north where she lived.
She lived with you for some winters, didn't she?
Oh yeah, she came down here 2 winters. But this was afterwards, and when she had to go right into the hospital, not just the convalescent hospital, you know, where they walk around, but she had to be in the hospital. So I went up there and was there a month with her. And then I came home, and she died 10 days later. So the last part of it, I really don't know too much about it,
Okay.
except that her body was brought down here to Toledo, and then her ashes were shipped back up to her hometown.
Well,
I don't know if you want to put that in there or not, but
well, it doesn't matter.
it's what happened.
Um, is there anything else that you'd like to add about just yourself becoming an older person?
Uh,
How you like it or how you don't like it?
well, I liked it until I lost my sight. uh, because I could knit, crochet, do all kinds of things for my own self.
Do all those grandma things, huh?
And all the grandma things, and made several things for all the grandchildren, and loved them all, and tried to remember their birthdays and everything. And now I can't even see to address an envelope.
But you have people helping you do
But
that.
I have people helping me. In fact, your dad,
Mm-hmm.
Jim, and your mom, and her mother, Mimi, and my neighbor, Joyce and Danny, and Peters live on the corner, they help. And the other party that lives across from me keeps my lawn mowed. Things I used to do all myself. But now I have to call on them.
Okay.
And I call on them when I get one of these anxiety spells.
But you're glad they're there.
And I'm glad they're there.
And you can still maintain a level of independence?
I try
By
to
using
very
their help?
hard, yes.
Well, you obviously do.
I
since
try
you're...
to keep, I always try to keep my dishes done. And I always try to make my bed, although I walked away from it this time without it being made,
Well,
which
that's
is
okay.
unusual.
Well, we'll forgive you for that.
Okay, I hope you do.
So you would say that remembering the names and the people that are important to you is keeps you going too?
Keeps me going, and I have many, many, many dear friends at my church, and they've all been kind and called and sent me cards, and I love every one of them.
Well, we love you too, Grandma.
And my children, my grandchildren love me, and I love them. I
Thank
love them to a point where I want to hug them all the time.
Well, that's fine. Or you want to give me a hug?
I do. A great big one. A great big hug.
I love you, Grandma.
I love you too. And I drove 500 miles to see you when you were born.
Thank you. I don't remember it,
No, I'm afraid you don't.
but I thank you.
And then we drove down to Cincinnati when Carrie was born,
Yeah.
and went to the Toledo Hospital when Jimmy was born, and looked at him. He was 2 hours old.
And he was
And
big.
we looked in the nursery with his other grandma, and I said, boy, look at them fists and them eyes. They're ready to take off.
Yeah. And now he's 6'1".
And now he's a 6-footer.
Yeah.
And he's not 14 years old yet.
He's gonna be.
But
a
he's
big one.
been a doll ever since I saw him.
Well, you know, he loves to play basketball, and he must have inherited that from you, since you
Yeah,
played
I
basketball.
used to like to play basketball too. And I did. I enjoyed it. We had lots of fun, even though we never won many games. We won from our own group. You know, we had 2 groups. And sometimes we'd win from them, but when we had to go to Frankfurt or Benzonia to play, we didn't win very many games. In fact, not any. I think I got the only score we ever won
You
in
scored?
that one game, because I was one of the forwards, and I scored a 2-point. And the rest of the girls that were in the other team from the other town, I think they got up way over 100. I
Over
remember
100
right.
points, and you only scored 2?
And I only scored
But
2.
you scored.
But I scored,
Well, that's what counts.
and I loved it. Oh, and one thing, my dad, he never went in for giving us any extra clothes, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or anything like that. But he did buy me a pair of tennis shoes, so I can play basketball.
Well, that's great, Grandma.
Yeah.
And I think that's really all that I
Good.
needed to know, and I thank you very much.
Oh, Jennifer, you are welcome. But it's a lot of, uh, well, it's a part of the life,
Yeah,
I guess. But life goes on,
sure does.
and I'm glad I could help you.
Well, you did. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.